The conference room door swung open with a pneumatic hiss, and time fractured like cheap glass under a boot heel. Jonathan's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished oak floor in a spray of ceramic shards and dark liquid that pooled like spilled secrets. "Holy shit," he breathed, the word escaping raw and ragged, as the man from his pixelated teenage dreams stepped into the fluorescent glare of his adult life. Jonathan Caldwell had built his empire on the bones of forgotten conversations, late-night code sprints in dimly lit Brooklyn basements, fueled by Red Bull and the relentless hum of ambition. At 34, he was the Wunderkind VP of Talent Acquisition at Ecotech, a midtown Manhattan startup that promised to revolutionize how the world connected, one algorithm at a time. His office overlooked the ceaseless pulse of Fifth Avenue, where yellow cabs honked like impatient lovers and pedestrians blurred into a mosaic of hurried lives. But on this muggy September afternoon in 2025, with the AC wheezing against the early fall heat, Jonathan felt the first crack in his carefully curated facade. He'd been scrolling through resumes for the senior developer role, a position that demanded not just technical chops but a certain intangible spark, the kind that could code poetry into profit margins. The stack was digital, of course, endless PDFs flickering on his triple monitor setup. But he'd printed a few outliers, the ones with that elusive gut punch vibe. And there it was, Nathaniel Hayes. The name hit like a sucker punch to the solar plexus. Jonathan's thumb froze mid-swipe, his pulse thundering in his ears louder than the distant wail of an ambulance slicing through traffic below. Nathaniel Hayes. Jesus Christ. It had been 18 years since those endless summer nights in '07, when Jonathan, then just Johnny, a scrawny 17-year-old holed up in his parents' cramped Queens apartment, had first typed screen name, Pixel Ghost 87, into a shady AOL chat room called Boys Only NYC. Back then, the internet was a wild frontier, dial-up modems screeching like banshees, and gay kids like him navigated it with the caution of poachers in a lion's den. Jonathan's folks were old-school Italian Catholics, the kind who crossed themselves at the mention of anything deviant, so he'd learned early to bury his truths deep, under layers of sarcasm and straight-A report cards. The chat room was a glitchy oasis, avatars blinking like fireflies in the void. That's where he'd met Nate, screen name, Shadow Whisper 22, a soft-spoken kid from upstate who typed with a vulnerability that made Jonathan's chest ache. Their first exchange was clumsy poetry. "Hey, you ever feel like you're screaming into a black hole?" Nate had written, and Jonathan, heart hammering, shot back, "Every damn day." "What's your poison?" From there, it unraveled like a fever dream, hours of shared confessions, pixelated flirtations that bloomed into something dangerously real. Nate talked about his conservative family in Rochester, the suffocating weight of being the golden boy who secretly devoured Walt Whitman under his bedsheets. Jonathan spilled about the bullies at St. Mary's High, the way he'd punch mirrors to feel something other than invisible. They never exchanged photos, never risked voices over shaky webcams. It was safer that way, a digital umbilical cord tethering two boys adrift in their own storms. One day, Nate typed one humid August night, as thunder rumbled outside Jonathan's window, "We'll meet in the city. Eat hot dogs from a cart on Times Square. Laugh about how we survived this shit." Jonathan had stared at those words until the screen blurred with unshed tears. "Promise?" he'd replied, and Nate's cursor danced. "Cross my heart, ghost boy." But promises in chat rooms were as fragile as dial-up connections. School started. Jonathan's dad got laid off from the auto plant, and suddenly there were no more late nights, just double shifts at the corner bodega and a family teetering on eviction's edge. He logged off for good one crisp October morning, the chatroom's farewell chime echoing like a slammed door. Nate's messages piled up unanswered in his inbox, ghosts he couldn't face. Life swallowed him whole. Community college on scholarships. A CS degree from NYU scraped together with loans and grit. Then the grind up Ecoteca's ladder. He dated sporadically, quick flings in dimly lit bars. A 2-year thing with a graphic designer that fizzled into polite texts, but nothing stuck. The what-ifs lingered like cigarette smoke, especially on lonely subway rides home to his overpriced Bushwick loft. Now, staring at that resume, Nathaniel Hayes, MIT grad, blockchain wizard with stints at Google and a fintech darling in Silicon Valley, Jonathan felt the past clawing its way back. The photo clipped to the file was a gut-wrencher. Nate, all grown into a man with sharp jawline, tousled dark hair, and eyes that still held that shadowed intensity. He looked like he'd stepped out of a J.Crew catalog. But Jonathan knew better. Those eyes had wept virtual tears over a keyboard. Mr. Hayes is here for his 2 p.m. His assistant buzzed over the intercom, voice chipper as a Starbucks barista. Jonathan's mouth went dry. He glanced at the clock, 1:58. No time to bail. No elegant exit from this collision course. He straightened his tie, a silk number from his one big splurge at Barney's, and smoothed his shirt over the slight paunch he'd earned from too many client dinners. "Send him in," he said, voice steady as rebar, though his insides churned like the East River at high tide. The door opened, and there he was. Nathaniel Hayes, 6 feet of quiet confidence in a navy suit that hugged his lean frame just right, carrying a leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. He moved with the easy grace of someone who'd outrun his demons, flashing a professional smile at the empty room, then froze as his gaze landed on Jonathan behind the desk. The air thickened, charged like the moment before a blackout. Nate's smile faltered, lips parting in a silent "oh." Jonathan's heart jackhammered, every nerve alight. "Mr. Hayes," Jonathan managed, rising on legs that felt like wet noodles, extending a hand that betrayed him with a slight tremor. "Jonathan Caldwell. Pleasure to meet you." Nate's grip was firm, warm, too warm, sending a jolt straight to Jonathan's core. Close. He smelled like cedar and clean soap, a far cry from the teenage cologne of desperation. "The pleasure's mine," Nate replied, voice deeper than Jonathan remembered, laced with that upstate lilt. But his eyes, God, those eyes, searched Jonathan's face like a man scanning a crowd for a lifeline. Recognition flickered, tentative at first, then blooming into something raw and unguarded. "Wait. Johnny, Pixel Ghost." The name hung between them, a live wire sparking in the sterile boardroom. Jonathan's throat tightened, the world narrowing to the man before him. 17 years, and here they were, 2 survivors circling each other in the belly of the beast. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to pull Nate across the desk and kiss him until the skyline blurred. Instead, he nodded, a jerky motion that cracked the dam. "Nate. Holy fuck. It's you." They stood there, hands still clasped, the resume forgotten on the desk like a discarded script. Outside, the city thrummed on, horns blaring, deals closing in glass towers, but in that room, time looped back on itself, dragging them under. Nate released his hand slowly, as if afraid Jonathan might vanish like a bad connection. I looked for you," after. For years. Thought you'd ghosted for good. Jonathan swallowed hard, the weight of old guilts pressing down. Life got messy. But yeah. It's me. He gestured to the chairs, the interview setup mocking them both. So. Blockchain. Huh? Tell me about that. Nate sank into the seat, but the professional veneer was shattered. They danced around it at first, Nate rattling off credentials with that easy charisma, Jonathan firing questions on autopilot, jotting notes that blurred into scribbles. But the undercurrent pulled strong, questions laced with subtext. What brought you back to New York? Jonathan asked, leaning forward, elbows on the table. Nate's gaze dropped to his hands, fingers tracing the edge of his bag. Closure, maybe, or a fresh start. Rochester's great for apple picking, but it chokes you after a while. He paused, eyes lifting with a vulnerability that twisted Jonathan's gut. You? Still coding worlds? Or just hiring the gods who do? Jonathan chuckled, low and genuine, the sound surprising him. Bit of both. Keeps the ghosts at bay. The word slipped out unintended, and Nate's expression softened, a bridge forming across the chasm. By the time the hour ticked down, the interview had morphed into something else, a halting reunion, fragments of memory pieced together over lukewarm coffee from the Keurig. Nate had come out at 22, after a brutal family fallout that left him couchsurfing in Boston. Jonathan confessed his own slow burn, therapy at 28, a pride flag on his balcony that still felt like defiance. They laughed about old chat lingo, BRB meaning bury repressed bullshit, and mourned the boys they'd been, fragile as crack screens. As Nate stood to leave, slinging his bag over his shoulder, the reluctance was palpable. This is not over, right? Not after this. Jonathan's chest ached with the truth of it. Dinner? Tomorrow. Somewhere real. Not this corporate hell. Nate's smile broke wide, lighting the room like dawn over the Hudson. Yeah. Real sounds perfect. Watching him go, Jonathan slumped back, the shattered mug crunching under his shoe. The past wasn't buried. It was alive, kicking, demanding its due. And for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to answer. The next 24 hours blurred into a haze of what-ifs and half-formed plans, Jonathan's mind a whirlwind as he navigated Ecoteca's Friday frenzy. Emails pinged like gunfire, budget approvals for the Q4 push, a glitch in the beta app that had devs cursing in Slack channels, but his focus splintered, drifting to Nate's laugh, that low rumble echoing from their chat room days. He'd canceled a gym session, opting instead for a run along the West Side Highway, pounding pavement as the sun dipped behind Jersey, sweat stinging his eyes like unshed regrets. By nightfall, back in his loft with its exposed brick and IKEA regrets, he paced the kitchenette, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Nate's newly acquired number. Texting felt too small, too millennial for the gravity of it all. He fired off a simple Mario's on Bleecker, 7 p.m., Italian, no bullshit, and hit send before cowardice could intervene. Nate's reply buzzed back in seconds. Hell yes. Wear that tie. Makes you look dangerous. Jonathan grinned despite himself, the flirtation a spark to dry tinder. Saturday dawned crisp, the kind of autumn bite that turned Central Park into a postcard of crimson and gold. Jonathan arrived early, 15 minutes ticking by as he nursed a Negroni at the scarred wooden bar, the place a village staple with checkered tablecloths and Sinatra crooning from hidden speakers. Mario's was the anti-hipster joint, no avocado toast. Just red sauce that clung to your soul and garlic bread that could resurrect the dead. It was the spot he'd taken his ex. The one who'd bailed citing irreconcilable ambitions. But tonight it felt like neutral ground, a canvas for rewriting history. Nate pushed through the door at 7:02, wind-tousled and flushed from the walk, shedding his wool overcoat to reveal a simple Henley that hugged his chest in ways that made Jonathan's mouth dry. No suit now, just Nate, real and reachable, sliding into the booth with a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Smells like home," he said, inhaling deep. Or what home should have been. They ordered family-style, linguine alle vongole, eggplant parm that arrived bubbling under a crust of mozzarella, a bottle of Chianti that flowed like confessions. Conversation started light, a bridge of small talk over breadsticks, Nate's Valley exile, the grind of startup equity that never cashed out, his quiet coming out to a sister who'd become his rock. Jonathan shared war stories from Ecoteca's trenches, the all-nighters birthing the app, the boardroom battles with venture vamps sucking the life from innovation. Laughter came easy, punctuated by touches. Nate's knee brushing his under the table, accidental at first, then deliberate. But the wine loosened tongues, and the past seeped in like marinara on a white shirt. "I wrote you letters," Nate admitted over tiramisu, fork pausing mid-air. "Actual snail mail shit, after AOL died. Poured my guts out about running away to Boston. The first guy who broke my heart in a frat house bathroom. Mailed them to the address you dropped once, your folks' place in Queens. Bounced back every time. Return to sender. Felt like a cosmic fuck you." Jonathan's fork clattered, guilt twisting like a knife. "I never got that." He was paranoid about mail after September 11th. Screened everything. Probably tossed them thinking they were spam. He reached across, covering Nate's hand with his own. The contact electric. "I'm sorry. For vanishing. It wasn't you, it was me. Drowning in survival mode. Mom's MS diagnosis hit like a freight train. Dad drinking more. Me working doubles. Logging off was my white flag." Nate's fingers laced through his, holding tight. "I get it. Thought you up and died or something. Kept that chat log printed out, tucked in a drawer like a talisman. Read it on bad nights, when the world's too straight-laced." The admission hung heavy, sweet as the dessert's dusting of cocoa. Jonathan's thumb stroked Nate's knuckle, tracing the faint scar from a childhood bike crash he'd confessed online once. "You're here now. That's what matters." They lingered over espresso, the restaurant emptying around them, Mario himself comping the bill with a wink and a "bring him back" as they spilled onto Bleecker Street. The village pulsed alive, street performers juggling fire, couples entwined on stoops, the air thick with weed and possibility. Nate looped an arm around Jonathan's waist as they wandered, tentative at first, then bold, pulling him into the shadow of a brownstone. "This okay?" he murmured, breath warm against Jonathan's ear. "More than," Jonathan whispered, turning to claim his mouth. The kiss was 17 years in the making, soft at the edges, fierce at the core, tasting of Chianti and second chances. Nate's hands fisted in his shirt, bodies pressing close, the world fading to the thud of heartbeats and distant taxi horns. It was messy, urgent, a reclamation of stolen time. They broke apart gasping, foreheads touching, grins mirroring in the street lamp glow. "My place," Jonathan asked, voice husky. Nate nodded, eyes dark with want. Lead the way, ghost boy. The cab ride to Bushwick was a blur of tangled hands and stolen kisses, the driver muttering about traffic like white noise. Jonathan's loft, with its skyline view and king bed piled with threadbare quilts, welcomed them like an old friend. Clothes shed in a trail from door to bedroom, tie discarded like a shed skin. Henley yanked over Nate's head to reveal the lean muscle of a runner, scars and freckles mapping a life Jonathan had missed. They tumbled onto the sheets, exploration tentative then voracious, hands and mouths charting territories long imagined. Nate's skin was warm silk under Jonathan's palms, his gasps a symphony that drowned out the L train rumbling below. I've dreamed this, Nate confessed between kisses, voice breaking as Jonathan's lips trailed down his chest. You, here. Real. Jonathan paused, hovering, meeting his gaze. Me too. Every lonely night, he dipped lower, drawing moans that echoed off brick walls, bodies sinking in a rhythm as old as longing itself. It was worship. It was war, tender bites on collarbones, fingers curling into hair, the slick slide of sweat-slicked skin. Climax crashed over them like a summer squall, Nate's cry muffled against Jonathan's shoulder, Jonathan following with a shudder that racked him to the bones. After, they lay entwined, sheets twisted like vines, the city lights painting stripes across their limbs. Nate traced lazy patterns on Jonathan's back, fingers spelling out invisible words. What now? He murmured, voice thick with sated sleep. Jonathan pressed a kiss to his temple. We figure it. Day by day. No more ghosts, but as Nate drifted off, breath evening into snores, Jonathan stared at the ceiling, a shadow stirring in his chest. Echoteca's expansion loomed. Layoffs whispered in hallways. The senior dev role a make or break for Nate's entry. And Jonathan? He was the gatekeeper, the one who'd have to sign off. The kiss of ethics tasted bitter on his tongue, a premonition of fractures to come. Monday morning slammed in with the subtlety of a hangover. Alarms blaring at 6 a.m., the coffee machine gurgling like a resentful beast. Jonathan woke to Nate's side of the bed cool. A note on the pillow. Early flight back to SF for wrap-up. Be good. Dinner wed? N. He smiled, folding it into his wallet like a lucky charm. Then showered off the night's musk. Dressing in armor. Crisp Oxford. Slacks that hid the love bites blooming on his hips. Echoteca's bullpen buzzed with the usual chaos. Coders hunched over laptops. Marketers pitching viral dreams to anyone who'd listen. Jonathan's office felt smaller, the walls closing in as he reviewed Nate's file again. The recommendation now a Pandora's box. He greenlit it mid-morning, fingers flying over keys with a mix of thrill and dread. Hire, he typed to HR, CCing his boss, the word a commitment etched in digital ink. By lunch, the rumor mill churned, a whistleblower email circulating, anonymous claims of nepotism in hiring, fingers pointing at Caldwell's golden boys. Jonathan's stomach dropped. Who? A disgruntled junior? The timing reeked of sabotage. He spent the afternoon in damage control, meetings bleeding into calls, assuring the CEO that integrity was Echoteca's North Star, even as his own star wobbled. That night, alone with takeout lo mein and a six-pack of IPA, Jonathan scrolled old emails, unearthing a buried thread from 2010. Nate, reaching out via LinkedIn after finding him through mutual tech circles. Heard you're killing it in NYC. Coffee sometime? Jonathan had ghosted then too, buried in a merger crunch. The regret burned fresh, a reminder that patterns die hard. Wednesday's dinner was at a rooftop in Soho, skyline sprawling like a promise. Nate arrived jet-lagged but electric, regaling Jonathan with valley gossip over burrata and heirloom tomatoes. They talked futures, Nate's relocation logistics, Jonathan's sabbatical dreams, but under it simmered unease. Heard about the drama at your shop, Nate said casually, spearing a cherry. Someone gunning for you? Jonathan's fork paused. Water under the bridge. Just office politics. He forced a laugh, but Nate's eyes narrowed, that old perceptiveness cutting through. Promise me we're good, Nate pressed, hand finding Jonathan's across the linen. No bullshit. Scout's honor, Jonathan lied, the words tasting like ash. Because deep down, he knew. The boardroom reunion was just the opening act, and the curtain was rising on Act Two's storm. As they walked to Nate's hotel in the financial district, arms linked against the chill, Jonathan stole glances at the man beside him, vital, vibrant, a second chance wrapped in wool. But shadows lengthened with the witching hour, and in the lobby's golden light, as Nate pulled him into another searing kiss, Jonathan wondered if some reunions were meant to unravel. The weeks that followed were a delirious tightrope walk, balancing the thrill of rediscovery against the creeping rot of secrets. Nate's official offer letter landed like confetti on a Tuesday, and by Friday, he'd signed, the ink drying as quickly as their plans solidified. A sublet in Williamsburg, moving trucks booked for November, lazy Sundays mapped out over FaceTime calls that stretched into midnight confessions. Jonathan played tour guide on stolen weekends, brunch at Sarabeth's with its pumpkin waffles that tasted like autumn distilled, walks through the High Line where rusted rails whispered of industrial ghosts, nights tangled in Jonathan's loft where bodies spoke what words couldn't. Nate fit into Jonathan's life like a key turning in a long-jammed lock. He was the Ian to Jonathan's yang, where Jonathan overthought every pivot. Nate dove in with a coder's logic, debugging their rhythm with gentle nudges. You're not your job, he'd murmur during Jonathan's stress-fueled rants about quarterly targets, hands kneading tension from his shoulders. You're the guy who once typed, I feel like a glitch in the Matrix at 3 a.m. Remember that? Jonathan did, and in those moments, the boy he'd buried resurfaced, lighter, less armored. They cooked disasters in the loft's galley kitchen, carbonara that clumped like wet cement, redeemed by Nate's laughter and a pivot to delivery pizza. They binge-watched queer classics on Nate's laptop, curled under Afghans, debating the camp of The Birdcage versus the gut punch of Brokeback. Sex evolved from frantic reclamation to languid exploration. Mornings where sunlight slanted through blinds and Nate's mouth mapped lazy paths down Jonathan's spine, drawing sighs that fogged the windows. But beneath the idol, Fisher's spiderwebbed. Echoteca's whistleblower saga escalated mid-October, the anonymous email morphing into a full-blown internal audit. HR grilled Jonathan in a windowless conference room that smelled of stale donuts and suspicion. Spreadsheets splayed like accusation sheets. Any personal connections to candidates? The lead investigator probed. A bespectacled woman named Carla with eyes like laser sights. Jonathan's poker face held, forged in years of closeted negotiations. Standard vetting across the board, he replied, voice even. But sweat beaded under his collar, the lie a stone in his gut. Nate's hire was clean, his creds impeccable, but optics mattered in the C-suite. where favoritism was the eighth deadly sin. Nate sensed the strain, of course. Over pumpkin Alesh at a dive in Greenpoint one crisp evening, as leaves skittered like confetti along the sidewalks, he cornered Jonathan gently. "Talk to me. You're carrying this like Atlas on steroids." Jonathan stared into his pint, foam clinging like unresolved code. "Audit bullshit. Nothing to do with us." Nate's foot hooked around his ankle under the table. "The tether. Us is everything. If it's about me, it's not." The deflection came too sharp, and Nate recoiled, hurt flickering before he masked it with a nod. They finished the night in silence-tinged sex, bodies connecting even as words faltered, Nate's hands lingering too long, as if memorizing contours. The betrayal brewed in shadows Jonathan couldn't outrun. It started with a tip from a trusted dev, whispered in the men's room. "Watch your back, John." That email, traced to Marcus Hale's IP. "Junior PM, the one you passed over for promo last quarter." Marcus, ambitious, oily, with a grudge nursed since a botched team-building retreat in the Hamptons. Jonathan had dismissed him as background noise, but grudges festered in startups like mold in damp walls. Confrontation came at the Halloween Mixer, Ecoteca's annual bash in a loft space in Chelsea, decked with cobwebs and craft cocktails that glowed under blacklights. Jonathan arrived as a half-assed vampire, cape from a thrift shop, fangs that kept slipping. Nate at his side in a devil's horns getup, red horns glinting against his dark hair. They danced close in the throng, bodies swaying to a remix of Toxic, Nate's breath hot on his neck. "You're mine tonight," he teased, nipping Jonathan's earlobe. But Marcus lurked, a weasel in a werewolf mask, nursing a whiskey neat at the bar. Jonathan spotted him mid-song, the man's glare cutting through the strobe haze. Later, as Nate networked with devs over IPAs, Jonathan cornered him in the kitchenette, away from the pulsing bass. "What the fuck, man? The emails, it's you, isn't it?" Marcus sneered, mask tugged low. "Paranoid much, Caldwell? Maybe someone's just calling out your cozy hires." His eyes flicked to Nate across the room, implication dangling like a noose. Jonathan's fists clenched, vision tunneling. "Stay away from my team, or I'll bury you in paperwork till you choke." The threat landed flat, Marcus chuckling as he sauntered off. Jonathan rejoined Nate with a forced smile, but the poison seeped. That night, back in the loft, doubts gnawed as they made love. Nate's moans a balm that couldn't quite soothe. "I love you," Nate whispered in the afterglow, the words slipping out unbidden, raw as an exposed wire. Jonathan froze, heart seizing. Love? It was too soon, too vast for the fragile thing they were building. "Nate," he trailed off, pulling him closer instead of answering, the evasion a seed of discord. November ushered in with Nate's move, boxes cluttering the sublet like chaotic punctuation. Jonathan helped unpack over takeout Thai, laughing as they unearthed Nate's collection of vintage sci-fi paperbacks, spines cracked like old friendships. But the audit dragged, Carla's emails sharpening. Clarify relationship with Hayes. Conflict of interest. Jonathan stonewalled, deleting threads, but the noose tightened. The high point came Thanksgiving, a makeshift feast in Nate's half-furnished apartment, turkey from a rotisserie, sides scavenged from Whole Foods, a playlist of Motown soul. They ate cross-legged on the floor, candles flickering against bare walls, Nate's head on Jonathan's shoulder as they swayed to Ain't No Mountain High Enough. "This is us," Nate said, voice thick. "Building something real." Jonathan kissed his crown, throat tight. "Yeah. Real." But reality intruded Monday. A bombshell email from the CEO. Suspend Hayes onboarding pending review. Caldwell. Step back from hiring. Jonathan's world tilted, the screen blurring as he forwarded it to Nate with a terse, "We need to talk." Nate arrived at the loft that evening, face ashen, the devil horns long discarded but the horns of dilemma fresh. "You knew," he accused, voice cracking. "The audit, it's because of us." Jonathan paced, hands raking hair. "I was handling it. Marcus, that prick, he's the leak. Not you. Not us. But it is us." Nate's shout echoed, fists balled. "You hired me knowing the optics. What? Was I your charity case? The chat room boy you pitted into a job?" The words landed like shrapnel, drawing blood. "Fuck that. I hired you because you're brilliant. Because I..." Love hovered, unspoken, a grenade unpinned. Nate deflated, sinking onto the couch. "I can't lose this, John. Not now. But I won't be the reason you tank your career." The silence stretched, heavy as lead. Jonathan knelt before him, hands on knees. "We'll fight it. Together." Nate's eyes searched his, doubt warring with desire. Together. But as they kissed, tentative and tasting of fear, Jonathan felt the first thread snap. Betrayal wasn't Marcus's alone. It was the lie he'd let fester, the love he'd withheld. And in the quiet aftermath, as Nate slept fitfully beside him, Jonathan stared into the dark, knowing the storm was just cresting. December's chill seeped into the bones of the city, frost etching fractals on skyscraper windows, but the real freeze settled in Jonathan's loft like an uninvited guest. The suspension hit Nate hard, his sublet lease unsigned, boxes still taped shut in Ecoteca's storage unit, a limbo that turned their dates into tense negotiations over diner coffee and half-eaten burgers. Jonathan threw himself into the fray, lawyering up with a cut-rate employment attorney named Sal, a chain-smoking Italian from Bensonhurst who growled about corporate clusterfucks between drags on his Marlboro. "You've got no paper trail tying you to the hire," Sal assured over pastrami on rye in a midtown deli, the air thick with mustard and machismo. "But if they dig, optics kill. Keep it clean. Capice?" Clean was a joke. Jonathan's nights blurred into all-nighters, combing server logs for Marcus's digital fingerprints, building a counterdossier that read like a thriller script. He confronted the CEO in a corner office that smelled of leather and entitlement, laying out the sabotage with charts and timestamps. "Hail's the snake," Jonathan pressed, voice steel. "He's gunning for my spot, using Nate as bait." Elena Vasquez, Ecoteca's steely founder, a Latina powerhouse in Louboutins and power suits, leaned back, steepling fingers. "I appreciate the heads up, John. But protocol's protocol. The board's twitchy after that SEC sniff last year. Give it 2 weeks, re-interview Hayes through a neutral party." 2 weeks felt like 2 eternals. Nate retreated into freelance gigs, holed up in an Airbnb in Bed-Stuy, his texts growing clipped, swamped with code. "Talk soon." Jonathan's calls went to voicemail, voicemails piling like snowdrifts. The distance gnawed, a slow erosion. He filled voids with runs in Prospect Park, breath fogging in the brittle air, or bar crawls with old NYU buddies. nursing IPAs while they ribbed him about finally getting laid right. Christmas Eve found Jonathan solo in the loft. A Charlie Brown tree strung with dollar store lights twinkling forlornly. Takeout General Tso's cooling on the coffee table. Nate's flight to Rochester was grounded by a nor'easter, stranding him in a LaGuardia lounge with spotty Wi-Fi and a buzz of holiday desperation. They video-chatted at midnight, Nate's face pixelated on screen. Airport din a muffled roar. "Merry Christmas, ghost boy," he said, forcing cheer. Paper Santa hat perched jauntily. Jonathan's chest ached. The nickname a knife twist. "Miss you. This tree's pathetic without your sci-fi ornaments." Nate's laugh was hollow. "Next year, we'll do Hanukkah lights too." Compromise. But his eyes, those windows to the soul, held storms. "John. This mess. It's poisoning us." "Don't," Jonathan pleaded, leaning closer to the laptop, as if proximity could bridge the miles. "We're fighters. Remember?" Nate nodded, but the seed of doubt had sprouted thorns. "Yeah. Fighters." The new year dawned with false promises. Fireworks over the harbor. Resolutions scrawled on napkins at a Times Square rager. Jonathan crashed to numb the ache. Nate's re-interview loomed January 15th. A neutral HR drone named Trish presiding in a sterile conference room that echoed their first meeting's ghosts. Jonathan waited outside, pacing the hallway like a caged panther, tie askew from fidgeting. When Nate emerged, face unreadable, Jonathan pounced. "Well, offer reinstated," Nate said flatly, slinging his bag. "But on probation. 3 months. Prove my salt." Relief flooded Jonathan, hot and heady. "That's huge. Dinner, my treat. Peter Luger. Stakes on me." Nate's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Rain check? Jet lag's a bitch." The brush-off stung, but Jonathan chalked it to exhaustion, pouring energy into Nate's onboarding. He recused himself from oversight, handing reins to a mid-level manager, but proximity bred temptation, stolen lunches in the cafeteria, where Nate's knee nudged his under Formica tables, whispers laced with innuendo that promised later. The probation proved Nate's mettle. His code streamlined the app's back end, earning nods from the CTO, grudging respect from the team. Marcus slunk in shadows, his sabotage backfiring into a quiet demotion, but victory tasted Pyrrhic. By Valentine's, the thaw seemed real. Jonathan planned meticulously, a suite at the Beekman, a pre-war tower in lower Manhattan with clawfoot tubs and skyline views that screamed romance. He arrived early, nerves jangling like loose change, the room strewn with rose petals he'd vacuumed up twice for fear of clichés. Nate knocked at 8 sharp, bearing a bottle of Veuve and a grin that lit the chandelier. "You spoil me," he said, pulling Jonathan into a kiss that erased months of frost. Deep, devouring, hands roaming with renewed hunger. They made love with the ferocity of survivors, the tub steaming around them, bubbles popping like champagne corks as Nate straddled him, water sloshing over marble edges. "I love you," Nate gasped again, this time unprompted, eyes locked in the candle flicker. Jonathan's response tumbled free at last. "Love you too, Shadow." The words a dam breaking, flooding them both. But dawn brought the deluge. Jonathan's phone buzzed at 6 a.m., Elena's name flashing like a warning flare. Emergency board call. Now, he slipped from bed, Nate murmuring sleepily, and tuned into the video feed from the bathroom, porcelain cool under his palms. Elena's face filled the screen, grim as granite. Leak to TechCrunch. Anonymous source claiming Caldwell rigged Hayes hire, screenshots of your old chat logs. For Christ's sake. Jonathan's blood iced. What logs? From that ancient AOL dump. Someone hacked the archives, or bought M off a dark web forum. It's bad, John. Nepotism in the C-suite. Echoteca's dirty secret. Stocks dipping as we speak. Nate stirred in the next room, calling his name. Jonathan ended the call, bursting back to the bedroom, face ashen. Nate, did you? The question died on Nate's expression, shock morphing to betrayal. Did I what? Leak our shit? No. But, Marcus? He couldn't have. Nate bolted upright, sheets pooling. You think I'd torch us? After everything? Hurt laced his voice, sharp as shards. I don't know. Jonathan raked hands through his hair, panic clawing. Who else knew? The chat room. It's us. Exposed. Nate dressed in furious silence, yanking on jeans and sweater, the Veuve bottle kicking over in his haste, fizzing across the carpet like effervescent regret. You still don't trust me. After probation, after love, you're waiting for the other shoe. Nate, wait. The door slammed, echoing like finality. Jonathan sank to the bed, head in hands, the city waking indifferent below. Hours later, TechCrunch's article burned his retinas. Grainy screenshots of pixelated confessions. I feel like screaming into a black hole, plastered beside their professional headshots. The headline a scarlet letter. Marcus, no deeper. A memory surfaced. Nate's drunken story over Thanksgiving wine. About a Rochester ex. A hacker type with grudges longer than the Erie Canal. He doxed my grinder once. Nate had laughed it off. Kid shit. Jonathan's stomach roiled. Betrayal, seemed, was a two-way street, paved with pixels and poisoned by the past. He texted Nate a dozen apologies, calls rolling to voicemail. By evening, Echoteca's PR machine word, statements drafted, damage control in overdrive. Elena suspended Jonathan pending investigation, his badge a paperweight on his desk. Alone in the loft, Jonathan cracked a beer, staring at the ghost of their first mug shard, long vacuumed but etched in memory. Nate's reply came at 2 a.m. Need space. Don't call. The words blurred through tears Jonathan hadn't shed since his mom's funeral. Love, turned out, was the ultimate glitch, beautiful, brutal, begging to be debugged. February's gray skies mirrored the sludge in Jonathan's soul. The city a monochrome maze where every corner whispered Nate's name in neon flickers. Suspension stretched into weeks. Echoteca's glass towers a forbidden kingdom. His days dissolving into freelance consulting gigs scraped from Upwork. Dry audits for mom-and-pop apps that paid in peanuts and politeness. The loft, once a sanctuary, echoed hollow. Nate's forgotten paperback splayed on the nightstand like an accusation. Its pages yellowed with what now? He ran obsessively, miles bleeding into marathons along the Hudson, lungs burning as fiercely as his regrets. The rivers churn a metaphor too on the nose to ignore. Sal the lawyer proved a bulldog, unearthing the leaks trail. Not Marcus, not Nate's ex, but a black hat operative hired by a rival VC firm sniffing Echoteca's vulnerabilities. Corporate espionage. Pure and simple, Sal growled over Zoom, cigar smoke haloing his screen. Your chat logs? Bait to distract from their real play, poaching your IP. Elena reinstated Jonathan mid-month, A terse email hailing his loyalty under fire, but the victory rang tinny. Nate's probation lifted, but he'd tendered resignation the day after Valentine's. A polite missive citing personal realignments. Word in the bullpen. He jumped to a blockchain startup in Austin, Texas, farther than Rochester, a deliberate chasm. Jonathan's pride warred with desperation. Texts evolving from please, "We can fix this," to silence, a void that screamed louder than arguments. He threw himself into therapy, a grizzled queer shrink named Dr. Ruiz who chain-smoked sage in his village office, probing wounds with the precision of a surgeon. "Betrayal's a mirror," John, Ruiz drawled, voice like gravel under tires. "What do you see staring back?" The answer crystallized in a rain-lashed midnight. Himself, the ghost boy who'd vanished first, patterns repeating like buggy code. He booked a flight to Austin on a whim, one way, the kind of reckless pivot Nate would have championed. The airport bar swallowed him whole, Jack and Cokes blurring the layover, until boarding call jolted him upright, heart pounding with the thrill of freefall. Austin sprawled sun-baked and sprawling, a tech boomtown laced with barbecue smoke and live music bleed. Jonathan rented a beater Chevy, GPS barking directions to Nate's address, a sleek condo in South Congress, the kind with infinity pools and artisanal toasters. He parked curbside at dusk, engine ticking cool, palms slick on the wheel. Rain pattered the windshield, a Texas downpour that turned streets to mirrors. What if Nate slammed the door? What if he didn't? The buzzer yielded after an eternity. Nate's voice crackling through, "Yeah, it's me. John. Can we?" Silence. Then the click of release. Jonathan climbed the stairs on jelly legs, emerging into a hallway that smelled of sage and solder. Nate's cologne mingled with circuit board ozone. The door swung wide, Nate filling the frame in sweatpants and a faded MITT, hair tousled, eyes wary but softening at the edges. "You flew here." "Jesus." "Warp speed," Jonathan quipped, voice cracking on the edge. Rain dripped from his jacket, pooling at their feet. "Can I come in? Or should I monologue in the hall like a bad rom-com?" Nate stepped aside, a ghost of a smile. The condo was a coder's dream, minimalist lines, walls lined with dual monitors glowing like digital altars, a half-eaten Whataburger on the counter. They settled on a leather couch that creaked under tension, distance between them wider than the Mississippi. "Why?" Nate asked, arms crossed like barriers. Jonathan exhaled, the words tumbling like an unspooled reel. "Because I fucked up. From the jump, hiring you without full disclose, dodging the audit like a coward, questioning you when the leak hit. But mostly, I was scared. Of us. Of losing the life I clawed for. You deserved better than my half measures." Nate's gaze bored in, unflinching. "I resigned because it hurt too much. Seeing you every day, knowing we were tiptoeing around landmines. The chat room, our secret, splashed for clicks. Felt like I dragged you into my mess again. You didn't." Jonathan leaned forward, elbows on knees, the chasm narrowing inch by inch. "It was mine. The vanishing act in '07. The LinkedIn ghost in 2010. I'm the glitch, Nate. But I want to debug. If you'll let me." Rain hammered the windows, a percussion to Nate's silence. Minutes stretched, taut as bowstrings, until Nate unfolded, hand extending tentative. "Show me." Jonathan took it, pull turning to crush, and the dam shattered. They collided in a frenzy of need, kisses bruising, hands frantic under shirts, stumbling to the bedroom where Austen's lights bled through blinds. It was catharsis, bodies slamming truths, Nate's nails raking Jonathan's back like claims, Jonathan's mouth sealing promises on collarbones. Stay, Nate gasped, arching under him, the word a lifeline. Build with me, climax crested in tandem, a roar that drowned the storm, leaving them wrecked and whispering in the wet sheets. Dawn crept in with coffee and confessions. Nate's head on Jonathan's chest as they plotted, Jonathan's remote consulting gig, Nate's Austen team open to East Coast transplants. Slow, Nate murmured, fingers tracing tattoos. No more ghosts. No more, Jonathan echoed, the vow solid as code compiled clean. Months blurred into a new normal. Jonathan subletting the loft, flying southwest for weekends that stretched into weeks, Ecotech fading to a LinkedIn footnote. They adopted a mutt from a kill shelter, a scruffy terrier named Pixel who chewed remotes but mended fractures with sloppy kisses. Pride in June found them marching hand-in-hand down Austen's Congress Avenue, rainbows clashing with cowboy hats. Nate's sign reading, Love's no beta version. The humanistic close came quietly, on a porch swing in Nate's expanding backyard, fireflies winking like chat-room cursors. Jonathan, beer in hand, turned to the man who'd haunted and healed him. We made it, he said. Simple as that. Nate's smile, sunset gilded, held worlds. Yeah. We did. And it's just the beginning. In the end, reunion wasn't a boardroom thunderclap or a Valentine's implosion. It was this, two men, scarred and stubborn, choosing the messy code of together over the clean delete of alone. America, with its vast skies and vaster hearts, had room for such miracles. And in their rewritten story, the ghosts finally logged off for good.